Hey, so the idea was to grind out the last of my rookie profiles I'm going to do on YouTube. Just really kick out the bottom end of the list at running back and tight end. And we're already behind. We're really behind because the very first one I made and posted today, I got it wrong. I've tried to recently include combine stats in the database. And by combine in 2021, I mean Pro Day. And by Pro Day, I mean I don't care about them, so I didn't what you'd call fact check. I actually tried to fact check this video that I'm redoing right now live, and I still missed the fact that I had looked at. This is why we have player IDs, people. Like, use player IDs, okay? But apparently there's a Spencer Brown who's an O-lineman, and there's a Spencer Brown that is a running back in this same draft class, and I thought I had discovered the Hulk. It was a lot of fun. All the stuff on that video about his production was accurate, except I actually found a few missing receptions when I dug back in, which is concerning, but I fact-checked the receiving stats the rest of the way, and I think it was just a weird anomaly. But yeah, we're redoing. This is Spencer Brown, rookie profile, first look, nerd thing. I basically go through production and then adjust by the draft and then adjust by people's opinions who I respect and have come to respect, who take in other information than me, primarily watching football, because I don't think I have an advantage there. So if you're new, that's who I am, that's what I'm up to. You'll see me on the DLF channel every now and again, because I make them play my videos over there sometimes, and Addison needs a break every now and again, I think. My name's Peter Howard. I said that, didn't I? At Pahowdy on Twitter, right? I write for dynastyleaguefootball.com, or DLF.com as it's commonly referred to, and everywhere else pretty much, but DLF is my home. I'm the co-host of Dynasty Crossroads. You can check me out there. But I got to get these rookie profile videos out so I can get all the YouTube monies. I'm just joking. We don't make money I don't make money on YouTube. You can support me on Patreon if you want. Nah, I can't say it. It's too sleazy. I mean, you can if you want. But let's just talk about football. Can we? Maybe? Yeah, let's do that. So Spencer Brown is a running back, and he actually comes out as the highest grade in my production model for pre-draft prospects in the 2021 class, and he shouldn't, really. So let's talk about why. Let's look at his numbers, let's see why he was so highly ranked, and who he actually is, and where I actually am starting to think about ranking him. Pre-draft ranks only mean so much, just to be clear, especially after only a pretty detailed, but first look, kind of a sift through the production, but what can we do, man? We're here. Let's talk some football. Let's talk about Spencer Brown, the non-offensive lineman who looks like he's built like the Hulk compared to all of the running back drafted, but pretty good player. So, if you're interested in this database, or you want to burn it and delete it, then you can get your own copy of it. It's linked in the whatever the YouTube thing calls the thing below the description. Links to a Patreon post, but don't panic because it's no money. There's really no money. You just click on it and you go to the Google Sheet and you can make your own copy of it, delete it, cancel it, look at other players. I mean, just doodle on it if you want. It's there for you. So we can all argue about prospects, essentially. Yeah, that's that out of the way. Oh, no, check out the sources tab, because like actual smart people helped me put it together, and they deserve a follow or a like, or at least for you to know their names, so check out that bit. So Spencer Brown, yeah, he's at the very top of my pre-draft model, and I guess my pre-draft production model is basically a high testosterone rushing running back lover, because Jarrett Peterson's and Spencer Brown come out at the very top, and they have two very distinct things in common. They run the ball. They establish the run. As far as how they're gaining yards, that is what they do. And they do it a lot, and they do it pretty well. Now, the reason they're both coming up ahead of Etne and ahead of Harris is because, one, my production model loves players who are immensely productive in their situations, and they like them doing it a lot. And both of those players played multiple years. Jarrett Patterson played 2 years, playing more than 6 games. Spencer Brown played 4 years with more than 6 games. And they were basically the running back the first year they stepped onto the field. And so having good numbers every year for multiple years, it's just like, hey, I like that. And there is, I suspect it's got a testosterone. I've got a DT, my pre-draft model, because it loves the Russian man when looking at running backs, but there you go. So that's why they're at the top, and why Harris and Etienne come out slightly lower, but obviously the clear best running backs in this class with only a cursory glance. The other reason is that both are playing in lower conferences. You can see that from the drafted rate in recent years. No running backs have had a third-round pick spent on them from either the MAC East or the Cursor West. I've got to stop talking about Jarrett Patterson because this isn't his video, man. Get out of here, Jarrett, if that's your real name. Anyway, so things we know about running back. We actually kind of like running backs to come out a little bit earlier than just Spencer Brown is doing. In the same way with wide receiver, early declares, it tends to denote a lot of things. We think it denotes confidence that you're going to be drafted. Also denotes the interest level of the NFL. And again, both of these players are a low conference, so they kind of come out older anyway. But most running backs who turn into the top 12 running backs we're really seeking, or top 5 running backs we're really seeking, even the top 24, tend to come out a little earlier, okay? And they also tend to have a lot more receiving production than either of these guys do. But what they did in college, they did a lot of it, and they did it pretty well in the situation they were playing at. And that's basically the story of just Spencer Brown. Jarrett, go away. Get out my head. Please. Thank you. Anyway, so he's coming from the Cursor West. Now, the interesting thing about that and his drafted rate and everything else is there is one player that comes from, what is this team called? Alabama Birmingham, or UAB as it's listed on stat websites or actual football websites, I guess. Does have like a top 12 rusher in their history. They have one player going all the way back to 2000 that was really interesting at the running back position in their history, and that's Jordan Howard. Now, Jordan Howard played 2 years at UAB before transferring to, I believe, Indianapolis, where he again dominated at a higher level, then went on to the NFL with 4th round draft capital and did what he did. I'm assuming if you play fantasy football, you're vaguely aware of Jordan Howard. I mean, he had pretty good production. He's shown that talent can exist on UAB. It's fairly rare, and that talent actually got elevated to the next level. It was so distinctly not meant to be there. And again, Jordan Howard wasn't a world breaker for fantasy, but he was actually for 1 year. And I think he's done enough to tell us that he was talented above average at the position if given opportunity. La 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 la. And so, that's some hope for Spencer Brown, I guess. But that's about it. If you dig into the Alabama, Birmingham, or the UAB's history, you do come across some other players deeper back. Let me take off the draft year thing there. Hello? I have other players in this database. I have seen them. Thank you. Where am I? Trouble navigating your own stats. Jesus. Oh, that's right. Yeah, there's actually no other players from this team. No other players from UAB are at all interesting, except Jordan Howard, and he's listed under another team because he actually elevated to the next level. I went really far for that joke. Still, whatever. Context is only worth so much, and we can only judge a player based on where they played. I'm just trying to give you some sense of the fact that this is a 3rd, 4th round rookie flyer if they get interesting draft capital randomly, 4th round, 5th round, undrafted free agent to the freaking, I don't know, who does everyone like? Kansas City, I guess, because Spencer Brown's more of a rusher than Clyde. I don't know, I'm making up stories now, but you see what I mean. This is not a player I'm pumping out as being, make sure we get him. I just think he's a pretty interesting production running back at a much lower conference. It's much less likely to get opportunity in the NFL, but it's a name I'm keeping on the radar. Now, when I first saw him shoot up, I thought it was purely a function of his conference to the top. And Jarrett Patterson, whose damn name won't get out of my head, he actually showed up earlier for me because some opinions I respect, like Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies, kind of highlighted him on his film review of a lot of these players, whereas I haven't heard a lot of people talk about Spencer Brown. Since then, I've read a little bit more, and I hope to do a lot more research, and I think he's actually pretty good in the situation he came from. He's just a little bit undernamed. Now, if he had actually been the Hulk, he'd probably be talked about a lot. But, so, Did a long intro there, but I think it deserves it, you know. He broke out the very first year he played at age 18, which age-adjusted production has some relevance for running backs, but really you can look at their best season. What was the best that they did in their situation? When you look at the metrics that are actually in my pre-draft model, I've got them highlighted in purple here. Adjusted yards per team attempt with added emphasis on the receiving production. That's what it's adjusted by in their last year, because the last year is often their best, and the model knows to look for that. It also knows to look for yards per team pass attempt, so it's trying to adjust for some level of receiving role and efficiency and a large volume on that role too. Also the average of the yards per team attempt, so more strictly a rushing stat, but looking at that compared to the conference level. And finally, there's another one, but the other one that I like to look at that I've got highlighted is points per game over conference average, because honestly PPR points make a decent ranking order for running backs, although it tends to have a low probability. Let's not get too nerdy in terms of whether it works in models, but I wanted to include it because it does do interesting things when you rank classes by it, especially once draft capital is involved. And so I've just asked it to take a look at the fantasy points over conference average. So those are the metrics it's using, and if you compare it to someone like Najee Harris, you see that the reason Brown and Patterson are jumping up is because they were on the team so early, getting such a significant role, and being fairly decently efficient on that role, and you can see that in their first and their average stats compared to Etney and Harris. But again, one, we know the different prospects entirely because of where they're playing, and the competition level, I guess, with narrative would be that they're actually up against, but we also know who is more or less likely to get draft capital even before we see the draft. And we know that a running back, or if you don't know, you should know at running back, you can really concentrate on what was their height of production in that situation, because running backs tend to have a harder time getting on the field because there are only so many running backs on the field at any one time, and they don't get to be force the situation as much as wide receiver or even tight end and quarterback. Like if you're a wide receiver and you're on the field because you need 3 on the field at that time, it's harder to ignore a really good wide receiver who's just getting open more, running the right routes better or whatever else, and so they can earn targets that way. Whereas with a running back, you kind of sit your ass down on the bench if you're not meant to be on that play, and you can't really earn a carry when you're on the bench, if you know what I mean. I mean, the narrative goes longer than that, but I'm just going to leave it right there. So that's why they both, just Spencer Brown is coming out higher than Harris and Etney. It's because he was such a large part of this lower conference offense early and was doing fairly decent with it. How decent? There's no real conference or team adjustments I can give you that describe it compared to where Harris and Netane were playing. Most of those that I've tried to make kind of break down as useless. But I can show you this 3-tiered look on how they compare to the best prospects on their team, on their conference, and compared to hits that have actually happened in the NFL. And you can see that both Brown and Patterson were less impressive in their situation than Harris and Etney, but they were impressive. They were above average. That's why it's got that nice fancy little green bar, not a nasty little red one. They were also pretty good compared to their conference. That was a lower level. And when you compare them to all prospects that have actually gone on to do fairly well in the NFL, that's where they kind of fall down, even compared to compared directly to Harris and Etney. Although that Jared Patterson line's kind of blue, but still, that's where Spencer Brown's line falls down. It's not very good when you compare him to other players that have gone on to do well, and that's partly because of where he's coming from. And so I hope that tells kind of the story of how he's comparing directly to players playing in very different situations, even though he was a dominant running back for year one. If we go and look at it by year, and I've just got running back 1 and 2 and PPR points highlighted here for the UAB, just because there was a lot of them on a year-to-year basis, and I don't feel like having my screen zoomed in or zoomed out that far, so there we go. He was actually prolifically productive at UAB. Like, this 1.54 weighted yards per team attempt is actually like a slightly above average score for the UAB, and his 1.37 obviously falls slightly below. He wasn't that great in weighted yards per team pass attempt in that third year, and he's playing full seasons each year, and that's something that comes up in his profile. It's got over 4,000 total yards rushing. Like, that's a lot of rushing. But in his last year, I want to point out, or in other words, his best year, when he's as physically developed he's going to be, and it was 2020, and so we have to squint at a lot of those numbers. I'll point out this 0.202 number is actually slightly better than Jordan Howard ever managed on UAB, if I remember right. Obviously, it's a different team in a different situation because they're in a different competition, so it's a little unfair comparison between 2013 and 2014 and 2020. But it's worth noting, since he's the only significant player at the running back position to come from that team, it's kind of worth noting, I think, that he at least was as good as Jordan Howard on this lower level team from back a little further ago. And so I think that's overall positive about what he did for the UAB in this conference. And let me refilter. This takes a second, sorry. 2, 3, 4 years. Give me 4 years. Thank you. Just running back 1 and 2. Thank you. Yeah, and just the running backs. All right. And we're back. So, again, he steps on at age 18, which is pretty impressive, even in the UAB, even in the Cursor West, and he dominates purely pretty much through the rushing game. He's getting like 3, 4, 5 targets, and he caught a rushing touchdown in 1 year, and not his last year, but this is not a fella who's displayed an ability to play a part in the receiving game. Now, the reason that's important isn't because I don't think he's capable of catching a football. I'm pretty sure he can do everything physically better than me, and I can catch a football if you don't throw it too hard so it doesn't hurt my little nerd hands. So I'm pretty sure he can catch a football, to be honest. But we tend to find that NFL teams deploy players based on what they've seen them do in college. There are a few exceptions like Melvin Gordon, but typically the overarching narrative behind the pattern we see in the statistics is that teams draft players to do what they've seen them do in college. So what that means is it's not that it couldn't be different, not that you can't get on the practice field and go, hey, look, I'm freaking good at this, but anyone that puts him on their roster, having watched his college tape, is probably going to think of using him in a specific way that isn't in the receiving game. This is not someone that you watch the tape on and go, oh, that guy can, be a catcher for us. It's someone you look at and go, that man can put up some rushing yards. And you kind of see that not so much through his receiving percentiles because they're so low and it's hard to judge them unless you have a familiarity with running back receiving, but through his rushing yards. He's got 55% of his rushing yards in that very first year, which again is pretty impressive. 47% in his second year as running back 1 in all 4 of these years. In his final year, he was 68% of the team's rushing. Like, that's pretty impressive, honestly, to me, in any conference. That's complete domination of the running back position for UAB last year. And again, that's 2020, but so, yeah, there you go. You can also see that in his overall career stats, like 97% of all his yards came in the rushing game. Even for top 12 running backs, players with a top 12 season in the NFL who tend to be pretty dominant in the rushing game, except for Alvin Kamara, basically, average around 86%. So between 81 and 86% actually is a fairly good range to fall in to display a 3-down skill set. Spencer Brown's at 97%. This guy runs the ball, and anyone who puts him on his team is going to be expecting him to run the ball. That's what not that it doesn't change sometimes, but that's probably going to be the expectation, so it should probably be our expectation as well, which has a kind of a lower ceiling and fewer paths to becoming relevant for fantasy in the NFL. But again, in the one situation he played in, he was really good at it, and actually better at it than the one NFL player who did play on that team in the not-so-distant past, and I think that's overall impressive. Like, if I'm looking for a third-round pick and to spend on running backs, depending on what happens in the draft, because this guy really needs to land somewhere to show that some team is aware of him even, I think that's pretty good. Now, all that's the same as what I said basically in the last time I recorded this video. What's different is his combine numbers. Yes, exciting times. We have Pro Day / combine numbers for the 2021 class. I don't care, but his BMI is around 29, which it gets pretty close to the average for running backs that have fantasy significance. 29 or over is kind of the threshold. He ran a 4.58, which is pretty... That's honestly, like, that's it. That's a sentence. A lot of my sentences about Spencer Brown kind of tail off at the end, like Demeric Felton, who's a video I just did as well. That's fine. I mean, if he does something, they'll say he has a 4.5, and if he doesn't, they'll say he had a 4.6. I mean, that's honestly what we're going to do with a 40 time. Adjusted for his height and weight metrics, his height-adjusted speed score and weight-adjusted speed score kind of fall below the average line. But it's within range. Again, if he ever does anything decent, we'll be like, see, athletic enough. This isn't a guy that pops off the page. Like, I really, for a second, thought he was basically the Hulk. And this is a reasonably sized, reasonably athletic running back who was very dominant at a lower conference and could get some later draft capital spent on him. And that's kind of where I'm at. I haven't ranked him, haven't put him in my rookie ranks yet, but overall, I think this guy was pretty impressive. I don't see James Robinson, even though I don't have James Robinson's stats, because he played at an even lower level, but for the CFB, I think Spencer Brown was really good. I think he was really good in this situation. I think he did it for 4 years in a row. I think he's coming in with way too many touches and at an older age and from the wrong place and the wrong conference to really have too high expectations, but when you're looking for good profiles at a cheaper cost, I think Spencer Brown should stand out to us as a rusher. I think I mentioned this. He runs the ball. You want rushing yards? He got you. He got all the rushing yards for you. Not so much with the catches, but you know, professional athlete. He can sure as hell catch the ball. I'm pretty sure. So, okay, this went over 20 minutes. Redos suck, and so do I. But, wait. I'm gonna go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you didn't or did, let me know in the comments section below. And, yeah, thanks very much. And I'll talk to you next time you watch one of my videos, I guess. Or on Twitter, anytime, at Pahowdy. Thanks. Yeah, that's it. Bye.